They're huge.
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah. Well, it's
Okay. The new Mishnah all about the Omer. Perfect timing for second day of Pesach and onwards. 63b, new chapter. Rabbi Shmuel says, Omer hayaba b'Shabbos mishalosh sayin. Basically, the Omer you had to bring was 1/10 of an ephah. That's the measurement of fine flour. Was a serious ha'ephah, 1/10 of an ephah. You had to reap a certain amount of barley to get to that, and then sift it through. So you had to do reaping and then sifting. So Rabbi Shmuel said, let's say that the second day of Pesach fell on Shabbos. So now you have a requirement to it's permissible to violate Shabbos to do reaping and sifting, which are primary categories of violation on Shabbos, but you could do it. So what do? So really five reapings of barley would guarantee the best results to get that one good ephah of fine sifted flour. Rabbi Shmuel says though, Omer hayabah b'Shabbos b'shalosh sayin. On Shabbos you should only do 3, not 5. Ubechol, and on a weekday may chamish. On a weekday you could do 5. So you're going to reap 3 on Shabbos and sift through it, and you're going to get your 1/10 of an ephah. If you would do more, though, it'd be either easier to guarantee your 1/10 of an ephah. It'd be nicer that you have more barley to work with. Chachamim omrim echad Shabbos v'echad chol. The Chachamim say both on Shabbos and on a weekday only 3, not 5. Okay, echad Shabbos chol mishalosh. They're only 3. Okay. Yeah. Now we'll see a lot more about this in the coming weeks. So, Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim, Rabbi Chanina, the deputy of the Kohanim, Omer b'Shabbos hayaniktzar b'yachid u'b'magal echad u'b'kupa achas. On Shabbos, you would reap. One person would reap with one sickle in one basket. On a weekday, u'b'chol b'shlosha, b'shalosh kupos, b'shalosh magolos. We'll see. It was a whole reason because there's a lot of people there's a whole group of people that by Tusim that thought that when the Torah says you should do the Omer, it says mimacharas haShabbos, which literally means the day after Shabbos. They would always celebrate that on a Sunday. So the Gemara has the whole reason why this is coming to counteract their actions. So we'll see. The Chachamim Omrim echad Shabbos echad chol b'shalosh kupos u'b'shalosh magolos. So Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Chanina Tzkana Kohanim in 2 different areas differentiate between what we do on Shabbos and the weekday. The Chachamim, the sages, stay strong and they hold that it's the same on Shabbos. It's the same on the weekday. You use 3 baskets and 3 sickles. Yeah. Now, first debate was: do you reap 5? Do you reap 5 saw of barley or 3? So Bishlama Rabbanon Kasavri Isar and Mufchar Bishlosha Sayin Asi Veloshna B'chol Veloshna B'Shabbos. Chum say you can get a isaron of fine flour with 3 sa'ah of barley. It's fine. You still get your fine flour. Doesn't matter on Shabbos. Doesn't matter on the weekday. That's enough to get your desired result. However, what's with Rabbi Shmuel? Rabbi Shmuel, what do you hold? Ma'ika Savar. If you hold, because I'm sorry, Mufchar Lo Asiyala Mechamesh, the only way to get the measurement of flour, a fine sifted flour that you need is with 5 sa'ah of barley. So then, Afilu b'Shabbos. You should do it on Shabbos also. Afilu b'Shabbos nami. If you're going to tell me that he holds from 3 sa'ah of barley, you get a fine sifted ephah of flour. So then, afilu b'chol nami, then even on a weekday. Why do you split that 5 on a weekday, 3 on Shabbos? What's the rationale behind that split? So Amar Rava says that really, Kasavar Bishmol Isar Mufchar below Tircha Asi Mechamesh. without any exertion, any extra exertion. If you have 5 ephahs of barley, you'll get a isaron of fine sifted flour. However, betircha asi mi shalosh. With extra exertion, you can get it out of 3 of barley. So now, bichol on a weekday, on a weekday where you're permitted to do reaping and sifting, you'll bring it from 5 to hachi shvicha milsa. That's great. That's the best desired result. You can reap on the weekday, you can sift on a weekday, so get the best result possible. How about Shabbos? But Shabbos, now you have a conflict, because on the one hand, you want the best flour, the best chance of getting the best sifted flour. On the other hand, you can't reap and you can't sift anything extra on Shabbos. So what do you do? B'Shabbos mutav sheyarbe b'malacha akas b'harkada v'al yirbe b'malachos harbe. On Shabbos, it's better we do more sifting than do more work in general. So if you would have 5, you have to do more reaping and sifting. So here we're going to choose one. Better to do more sifting and minimize the reaping. Yeah, Rashi points out it's a whole bunch of malachos you do. You have to reap, and then you have to winnow, and then you have to select, do borer, and then you have to grind, and then you have to sift. So every time you get you're going to cut off another of barley. So then what's going to happen? You're doing reaping and winnowing and selecting and grinding. This way, better minimizing all of those and if you have to do more sifting, so you'll do more sifting. So even though it's permitted on Shabbos, but we try to do as little violation as we can. So it's better to do one violation numerous times, meaning sifting more, because you're only working with 3 ephah of barley. So you have to do more work to get the finest flour. But better that than to do 7 other malachos also. So that is Rabbi Shmuel's opinion. Okay. Now we're going to compare Rabbi Shmuel to another opinion and then show you that it's not comparable. So, or how it's different. Amar Rabba says, Rabbi Shmuel, that we just mentioned, Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, and Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, Amru davar echad. They say the same thing. Same principle. Tanya, let's say Erev Pesach fell out on Shabbos. So you have a sacrifice to bring. So Arba Asar Shechalios b'Shabbos on the 14th fell out on Shabbos. So what do you do? Mafshit, how much do you skin an animal? You have to skin it to get to the sacrificial parts. So the question is, how much can you skin? So Mafshit as a Pesach ad chaza de Rabbi Shmuel. Only until the chest. Only that's the minimal amount you need to get out the sacrificial parts. Yeah, because that part, you could take out the sacrificial parts, and that's offered on Shabbos. The other parts that are going to be eaten by the Korban Pesach, we eat in that night, that's going to have to wait till the evening. That you can't do. So do the minimal amount that you need, and don't do more because it's Shabbos. That is Divrei Rabbi Shmuel beno Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. So you see here, well, I guess and the sages say, Achi Yavshidas Kula. No, you're allowed to skin, flay the entire animal, even the parts, even to enable the parts that you're not going to be able to use until nighttime, meaning meaning the other parts of the korban of a sacrifice, which is going to be for human consumption. So, yeah. So what do you see though? Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, says just do the minimal amount. So we're saying, oh, that fits very nicely with what we just explained for Rabbi Shmuel. Just do three measurements of barley, and instead of 5. So they say a very similar thing. So now, Milo Amar Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Broka Hasam Kol Heicha de Efshar Lo Tarchinan. But Hachanami came into Efshar lo tarchina. So Hachanami came into Efshar lo tarchina. So don't you see that? Just like over there, whenever you don't have to do extra work, you shouldn't do it. So to here, you don't have to do extra work, so you're not going to do it. That's the attempted comparison. Says the Gemara Mimai, who says, Dil ma'ad kan lo kamer Rabbi Shmuel hacha ela deleka b'zayin touch. Rabbi Shmuel only said maybe our Rabbi Shmuel and our Mishnah said it over here because there's no disgrace to the sacrifice. Meaning, it's disgraceful to leave a holy sacrifice only half skinned and half not skinned. It looks like Rashi says like a nevela, like a carcass. On the one hand, it's a holy sacrifice, but you're leaving it there like you don't care about it. It's disgraceful. So maybe Rabbi Shmuel only said what he said because there was no factor of disgracing holy sacrifices. Aval Hassam, but who said he would agree to Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, when there's the Ika b'zayon kachim, when there is this disgrace to the kachim? Next page, Eimalach Kirabanan. He'll hold like the rabbis. Eimalach Kirabanan, he'll hold like the rabbis. That's one attempt. Or go the other way. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan, the son of Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who said what he said, you can skin half the animal, maybe he would agree to the rabbis over here. Inami, I come from Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan ben Broka. Hasam eladis avidle tzorich gavoa velo tzorich achule Shabbos. There, it's called tzorich gavoa. It means it's a necessity for up high, meaning it's in the base of Mikdash. It's a special necessity for the base of Mikdash. You're giving it, so to speak, to Hashem. So in that case, that's where he says, you can get your desired result without having to violate more Shabbos. But here, where you don't have that factor of needing to, so to speak, give to Hashem, to do something for the sake of high, meaning it's not, in our case, it's not done in the base of Mikdash. It'll eventually be brought in the base of Mikdash, but the actual reaping and the winnowing, that's not like a korban that's specifically holy in essence right now. If it's not for the tzorich gavoa and you have to violate Shabbos, so ema kirabanan svirale. So then, I could suffice for up high for Hashem and not have to violate more Shabbos. I'm not here. I'm not doing something for up high, so to speak. And I have to violate Shabbos. Ema kirabanan svirle. Maybe he'll hold like the rabbis that he'll hold like the rabbis that all you need is three. That all you need is three. We got to show sign. One second. Meaning, the rabbis and Rabbi Shmuel both say that in this case you do three on Shabbos. Our only question was for Rabbi Shmuel why he splits. So, guys, here for a second. Not the same thing. One second. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, it's a funny thing. Meaning, in our case, he would agree to the rabbis. Now, the rabbis in our case agree to Rabbi Shmuel that only 3 measurements can be reaped on Shabbos. But the point is that the rabbis don't split Shabbos from a weekday, meaning the rabbis in essence hold different than Rabbi Shmuel. Practically, they're both reaping only 3 measurements of barley on Shabbos. Rabbi Shmuel's minimizing what he does in a weekday on Shabbos. Instead of 5, he does 3. The rabbis, in essence, if they would require 5 in the weekday, they would require 3 on Shabbos as well. So in logic, he would agree to the rabbis that we're not going to minimize. We're not going to minimize on Shabbos. We would do whatever we have to do. Yeah, when it's permitted, right? Yeah. Okay. Ella, Amar, so really they're not similar, these 2 opinions. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Shmuel, but the son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, are actually different opinions. So Ella, Amar Rabba, Rabba says, again, trying to compare Rabbi Shmuel to somebody else. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Chanina, Skana Kohanim, Amar Davar Echa. Maybe the 2 opinions that argue on the rabbis in our Mishnah, maybe they hold the same logic. The Tanan, Rabbi Chanina's kind of Kohanim, what does he say? On Shabbos, next Rabbi Yachad b'Magal Echad v'Kuba Achas. On Shabbos, you got to only do tzira, reaping with 1 person, with 1 sickle in 1 basket. You're going to sift it through in one basket. On a weekday, though, you can do it with 3 people, with 3 baskets and 3 sickles. So now we see that the common denominator between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Chanina is they both do less on Shabbos than they would on a weekday, and in both cases the rabbis argue. So Milo Ka'amar Rabbi Chanina's kind of Kohanim. So did he not say Hasam came in the Efshar Lo Tarchinon, Hakanami came in the Efshar Lo Tarchinon, just like Rabbi Chanina said, since you don't have to use 3 sickles on Shabbos, you can suffice with 1. He'll agree that you don't have to use 5 measurements of barley. It'll suffice with 3. So they're saying in essence the same thing. Says Gemara, no, they're also different. Mimai, who says that's true? Maybe Dilma can come Rabbi Shmuel like a Milsa. Rabbi Shmuel only said what he said. He only said what he said, that you use 3 measurements and not 5 measurements, because the Leika Pirsume Milsa. There's no publicizing the matter. Aval Hasam the Ika Pirsume Milsa, Ema Kirabanan Svirle, and the using 5 or 3, it doesn't publicize the matter anymore. But in the debate between Rabbi Chanina and the rabbis, so that's a big deal, because Rabbi Chanina says on Shabbos you only use 1 person, not 3 people. So maybe when he wants to let the matter be known, now once again, I think that we're going to find out later, but this idea of having 3 people important to publicize, because of that group of people that denied that the day after Shabbos refers to Pesach and not Shabbos itself. So we'll see more exactly about that. But the point is that there's a special logic over there, a special reason over there to let the matter be known in public. Maybe Rabbi Shmuel agrees to that. Maybe he agrees that even on Shabbos you should let the matter known for those calculations, which we'll have to see later on. As opposed to 5 to 3, there's no more or less in terms of letting the matter be known. So inami, or you go the other way. Whether you do it with 1 person or with 3 people, you're still doing it for Apayim, and you're still doing it for Hashem. So since you're doing it, something that's related to the Beis HaMikdash, so then you should do it in the most proper way possible. Aval hacha, the lowest avid kil chaso, tzorach kavoa, ema kirabanim sirlei. In his case, he felt that by using 3 people and 3 sickles, so that's something which is both 1 or 3, you're still doing the reaping is done in the most proper way. The question is, how much do you publicize it? With one person or with three people, but the actual reaping is the same quality. So maybe that's why he says what he says over there. There's no reason to have to do three on Shabbos. You can do it with one person because it's going to be qualitatively the same. But maybe when it comes to 5 measurements of barley or 3 measurements of barley, so that's qualitatively going to be very different. You get more of a guarantee of your product if you reap 5 grains of barley and not 3. So maybe over there, Ema ki Rabbanan Sfirale. Maybe there he holds like the rabbis. So once again, Rabbi Shmuel is not the same as Rabbi Chanina. You could differentiate between the two cases. Third attempt. El Amar Rav Ashi, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, Amar Davar Echad. Rav Ashi says maybe Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yossi say the same thing. But it seems like Rabbi Shmuel was a big novelty over here that you split on Shabbos and the weekday. So if we can find someone else who holds that similar logic, we'll lower the novelty down a little, and he'll have some friends. So Elamar Rav Ashi, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yossi, Amar Davar Echad. So now, we know that on Shabbos a person can't walk out what's called Tchum Shabbos. So 2,000 amos, you can't walk past that. So now, what would happen if back when they were sanctifying the moon, they did it by seeing the new moon? You had to come to the temple. So what happens if you have to walk outside of your boundary? So what do? That's also a violation of Shabbos on the one hand. On the other hand, you have to sanctify the new moon. You have a mitzvah to sanctify the new moon. So you have this conflict. So what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says as follows: the Tanan bein shenira ba'alil, whether you see the new moon in its clearly, ubein shelo nira ba'alil, whether it's a little foggy. Now clearly, there's less reason for you to travel up to the temple. So, so Yossi Omer says as follows: do not profane the Shabbos. So once again, Rabbi Yossi saying that if you see it clearly, so once again, we're going to minimize our Shabbos desecration. You can assume that the high court saw it. So now, Milo Amar Rabbi Yossi Hasam came to after Lotarchinan. Once again, same thing. If you don't have to do extra work on Shabbos, you can minimize the exertion. So then minimize it. Well, that would be the same as the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. So now, says the Gemara, Mimai Dilma ad kama kam Rabbi Shmuel hacha ela deleka nimtzes ata machshil na asid level. Aval hasam de nimtzes ata machshil asid level ema kirabanan svirale. So by the new moon, what's going to happen? If you don't allow people to come on Shabbos, even when they see it clearly, they might think, oh, why? Because, the Bezdin saw it. So you might cause them to stumble in the future, because even when it's not so clear, they might mistakenly think, the Bezdin saw it. Last time they didn't want me, they don't want me now either. So you're going to cause them to stumble. So maybe that's a new factor. So Rabbi Shmuel will agree to the rabbis that even if you see it clearly, let them come, because if not, then they're never going to come. So right, I was thinking about it. It's interesting in the human psyche, right? You're going to let someone do something, right? And if you don't let him do it, don't give him the ability to do something. You want to do it yourself. So then, in this case, you don't need him, but you should let him do it so he can feel like he's empowered. But then next time, if you don't let him do it, he'll think, he did it himself. He doesn't need me, right? It's a similar thing. If you don't let someone have a chance of failing, then he's not going to want to be more helpful even in the future. So maybe he agrees to the rabbis, inami, or go the other way. there it's not considered something which is for the up high. I mean, it's not sacrificial. Velo nitna Shabbos lidchos, and therefore Shabbos is not so fast to just be pushed away and desecrated. Of al-hacha, you get kavoa. You're doing it for a sacrifice. That's something unique. Vinitana Shabbos lidachos, and we know for sacrifices the Shabbos already is desecrated. I mean, you're allowed to bring certain sacrifices on Shabbos. So there, maybe ema kirabanan sfirle. There's more leniency, more room to hold like the rabbis that you do whatever you have to do on a weekday, you can do on Shabbos as well. Even though in this case you're still only reaping 3, but the rabbis in essence hold that we don't split between the weekday and Shabbos, because whatever you have to do for the sake of this sacrifice, you do, as opposed to Rabbi Shmuel that minimizes desecration. Okay, so now on this topic, Itmar, what happens? Shachat shtei chatos shel tzibur ve'eino tzarich ela achas. You only needed one sin offering, communal sin offering, but you slaughtered 2 on Shabbos. Now, slaughtering is for sure prohibited on Shabbos. Okay, so communal sin offering, you're allowed to, but only 1, not 2. So what happens? You slaughtered 2. Ve'eino tzarich ela achas. And you only need 1. Amar Rabba v'itema Rabbi Ami chayiv ala shniya upater ala rishona. You're liable for the second one, and you're exempt from the first one. V'afilu niskaper lo b'shniya. And even if the second one gives you atonement, meaning what's the case? So after you slaughtered the second one, the blood of the first one spilled, and at the end of the day, the first one's blood spilled. So you're going to end up needing the second one for your atonement. So it doesn't matter, because your original slaughtering of the second one was prohibited. You only needed 1 sacrifice. You slaughtered 2, and now you're going to end up using the second one for the atonement because the first one spilled. Remember, we have 2 kinds of spills. I think one is a spill straight out of the animal onto the floor that you can never recover from. If it's in the vessel and then spills, then you could, at least, I don't remember if it's in all cases, but you can scoop up from the floor of the temple and sprinkle it and it'll be good to go. So, okay. So Shachat Shekatos and Shelti Reina Tzarka La'achas Amar Rabba Vitim Rabbi Ami Chayiv Al Shni. You're liable for the slaughtering of the second one. Upata Rishona Va'afilu Niskaper L'Shni. Even if you get atonement from the second one, Va'afilu Nimtzeis Rishona Kichusha. Even if the first one is lean and not fatty, so that's not proper. You want to bring the favorable sacrifice. It's a pasuk in Malachi. The more fatty it is, the more favorable it is. So even before you slaughter the second one, and you saw the first one was lean and not fatty, you still can't slaughter the second one. So this is all the opinion of Rabbah. Or some say Rabbi Ami. So says the Gemara, what? Umi Amar Rabbah Haki. Did Rabbah really say this? I have another statement of Rabbah that contradicts it. The Ha Amar Rabbah. Hayu lifanav shtei chatos. Rabbah said, you have in front of you 2 sin offerings. Achas shmeina v'achas kechusha. One is fatty, one is lean. Shachat shmeina v'achar kach shachat kechusha. You slaughter the fatty one, and then you slaughter the lean one. Chayiv. Chayiv. You're liable. You can't slaughter the second one, especially if it's lean. But what if it's the other way? And here's the contradiction. Kichusha v'yachar kach shmeina. Kichusha, if the first one's lean and the second one is fatty, then you're pater. Then you're exempt. So if the first one is lean and the second one is fatty, then you are exempt. And that's a direct contradiction to this Amoraic statement that we had earlier in the name of Rabbah. We have Rabbah himself here saying that you're exempt for that, not liable. Not only that, they'll say, ideally, now go bring the fatty one and slaughter it. Even though your first one you slaughtered was lean, go slaughter the second one and bring it up. So we have a contradiction. So we have two answers now. Ibais ema sami kechusha mikamaisa. The first Amoraic statement, take out that part about it being lean, then there's no contradiction. Ibais ema hahi Rabbi Ami amra. That Amoraic statement we had, it was either Rabba or Rabbi Ami. So say it's Rabbi Ami because Rabba is a direct contradiction. So, okay. So now Amar le Ravina le Ravashi. Ravina says to Ravashi, Nimtes harishona kechusha bivnei me'ayin mahu. So now you slaughtered the second one, but it turns out, meaning the first one looked fatty, and you went to go slaughter a second one. But now you did some internal examination, and the first one is now lean, not fatty. Yeah. So what do? Meaning, on the one hand, when you slaughtered, it was not appropriate. You slaughtered the animal, it was fine. Why are you doing another slaughtering? Inappropriate. On the other hand, now after you slaughtered, you internally examine the first one, and it ends up being a lean animal. So according to Rabbah, who we just said, that says you're exempt when the first one is lean and the second one is fatty. So in this case, you thought the first one was fatty and favorable, but you ended up being wrong. So your intent was for an Aveira when you slaughtered the second one. Your actions, though, should be exempt from an Aveira because the first one ended up being lean. So if you'd have known that ahead of time, it would be permissible to slaughter the second one. So do we say, very interesting question, Basar machshavto as linan? We go after your thoughts. The gavra leisur kamechaven. The end of the day, your intent was for an Aveira, and that's that. And therefore you're liable. O dilma basar ma'asav as linan. Or we go after your actions. At the end of the day, what are you going to say? Rabbi, the first one was lean and the second one was fatty. So what did I do wrong? It comes out I was right. So which way do you go? This is a very interesting in terms of how this plays out on Shabbos. How essential is your thoughts and your actions? Your original thought with your justified actions afterwards. Does it not justify? Yeah, justify. So Amarle, he told him, Lav Hainu de Rabba Virava. Is this not the same as Rabba Virava? And I remember this being brought up in the prohibition of trapping. This is very interesting. The Itmar, it says as follows. Shama shetava tinok bayam. You find out it says tinok, someone's drowning in the ocean, meaning it sounds like, I don't know if it has to mean a baby versus not a baby. It means someone that you cannot, that needs help. So what do? You go and put out a fishing net. Uparas mitsuda lahalos dugim. But you only have in mind to catch fish on Shabbos, which is a violation. So you go to catch fish on Shabbos, vehela dugim, and you caught fish. So that you're chayiv, that you're liable. Fine. Lahalos dugim. Now you had in mind to catch fish. Vehela dugim vitino. But you end up catching the fish and the human being. Now, it's permitted to save the human being's life. And even if while you're saving the human being, it sounds like the fish come into the net, that's also permitted. Because the act you're doing is permitted. You're allowed to save a human life. If you happen to trap fish along the way, then you're going to be exempt. So this is the same thing. You have in mind to catch fish. You end up doing something, saving a life, which means that your act of trapping turns out was a permitted act. So what's the halacha? So Rava Amar Chayiv. Rava says you're still liable. Virabba Amar Pater, and Rava says you're exempt. So at first glance, this Rava and Rava seem like these two sides of our doubt. Do you go after someone's thoughts? If you go after the thoughts, that's why Rava says you're liable. If you go after the actions, that's why Rava says you're exempt. So maybe this is exactly our debate. Yeah. Okay, so now we say no. The Adkan Rabba Loka Pater. The only reason why Rabba said that you're going to be exempt here, even though you went to catch fish, the Adkan Rabba Loka Pater Ela came in the Shama. Since he heard that a child was drowning, we say Amrina Nami Daite Tinok. We say that his intent was also on the child. Avalo Shamalo. If he never heard the child was drowning, and he went and go to catch fish on Shabbos, and he ended up catching a child too and saving him, that's not permitted. So you see that really everyone agrees, both Rava and Rabba, that knowing something is wrong and it end up being right is still wrong. So if you know that you cannot slaughter a second animal and it ends up being that the first one it ends up being lean, it's still wrong. So the means don't justify the ends. So, or the ends don't justify the means. So that's one. V'yikid Amri, others say the following, that this question that we're asking, Amrle, Hainu Pluktayu de Rabba v'Rava. This is a debate, Rabba and Rava. The Itmar Shamash Tavatinok b'Yamel Paris Matzu Lahalos Dagim, v'Hela Dagim Chayiv Lahalos Dagim Hela Tinok v'Dagim Rabba Amar Pater Rava Amar Chayiv. So some say that really this Rabba and Rava that we just said, you heard about a child drowning and you went to go catch fish and you caught fish. For sure you're liable. You heard about a child drowning and you went to catch fish and you caught a fish in a person. Rabba says you're exempt. Rava says you're chayiv. Now, this version says Rabba Amar Pater why Zil Basar Maisa. He says it explicitly. The reason why you're exempt is because go after the actions. It comes out his act was permitted. So to in our case, he's going to say that you're not liable if the first animal ended up being lean. So that is Rava. The Rava Amar Chayiv Zil Basar Makshafto. But Rava says no, you're going to be liable because you have to go after the thought, and your thought was to do trapping on Shabbos, and that is not permitted. Yeah. Okay. More on this is Amar Rabba, some say Rava, Chole she'amduhu ligrogeris achas. So what happens? A sick person, they did an evaluation. The doctor came over on Shabbos, and they says, you know what? He needs to have a dry fig. That's going to be his remedy. Yeah. So what happens? 10 people went and carried in a public domain. They brought from their house, then went to a public domain, then back to this guy's house, 10 dried figs. So now, are you liable or not? So the answer is no. You are exempt because each one, there's a chance that his fig might be helpful. So that's permitted on Shabbos. They're all having in mind for the mitzvah. And Rashi quotes, I think this is brought down in Halacha, the Hazariz Lechol Meshubach. One who has a alacrity going to save a sick person is praiseworthy. You don't have to know for sure that he's going to die if not, but even there's a chance. So then that's praiseworthy act. Afilu b'zachar, even if they go one after another, afilu kadam v'hivri b'rishona, even if at the end of the day, the first dry fig healed him, they're still not liable because their act was permitted. They're allowed to go in a chance it's going to help and save a dying person, save a sick person. But Rava has a question. This is very interesting. I have to find the case. This came out. There's a case like this in Siberia, I believe. Very similar to this. You need only 2 figs. This is a very interesting Shabbos table discussion question. The person needs 2 figs. They're on 2 separate trees. 2 different violations. Or there's 1 tree with 3 figs. But you don't need 3. So what do you do? Hey minayo maisinon. Do you say shtayim maisinon tichazule? Give him just the 2 dried figs. That's all he needs. To bring him more is extra exertion on Shabbos. You can't do that. Or you'll say no. Dilma shalosh maisinon dekamayit ktira. Says no. When you bring 3, then you're lessening malacha. You're doing less. It's 1 act of reaping. So says the Gemara, pshita shalosh maisinon. It's obvious that you only do 3 and do less and do less ktsira. Let's just get to the Mishnah, next page. So why? How does this fit with Rabbi Shmuel in our Mishnah? The ad kan come Rabbi Shmuel hasam ela de chimimayit ba'achila from emayit b'ktsira. Aval hacha de chimimayit ba'achila kamaf shek tzira. So vadai shalosh ma'isinon. Rabbi Shmuel in our Mishnah says that when you're going to have less to eat, so then you're going to do less reaping. So you'll do less reaping. You'll do only 3 measurements to get your fine flour. Aval hacha, what's going to happen? If you're going to do less eating, meaning only 2 figs, you'll have to do an abundance of malacha. So when less eating is less work, that's Rabbi Shmuel. When less eating is more work, is more reaping, so then vadai shalosh ma'isinon. Okay, I'll stop here.